Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Merchant Kings, When Companies Ruled the World, 1600 to 1900, by Stephen R. Baum, narrated by Malcolm Hilgartner. Introduction. The Age of Heroic Commerce. Whosoever commands the trade of the world, commands the riches of the world, and consequently the world itself. Sir Walter Raleigh, circa 1600. From the early 1600s to the late 1800s, monopoly trading companies were the unofficial agents of European colonial expansion. They seized control of vast territories and many peoples, acquiring a variety of governmental and military functions in the wake of their commercial success. For European nations, granting monopoly trading rights to these companies was a convenient way of bankrolling the astronomical cost of colonial expansion. This tapping of private capital spurred what became known as the Age of Heroic Commerce. As each of these privileged enterprises grew, it first assumed a civil authority over all Europeans in its employment overseas, and then expanded this authority by subjugating local peoples. In working towards their political objectives, the merchant trading companies maintained their own police forces and, sometimes, standing armies, and either controlled the local governments or became the sole government of their territories. These territories were managed as business interests, in which people were considered as either employees, customers, or competitors. Beginning as traders, the leaders of these companies, the merchant kings, ended up with dictatorial political power over millions of people. This book is an account of 6 of these merchant kings and their impact. Jan Pieterszoon Koon was the ruthless pioneer of the Dutch East India Company, a trading enterprise that within its first 2 decades was in conflict with nearly every maritime nation in the world. During his reign, the company became the foundation for the wealth of the Netherlands' golden age by supplying most of Europe with exotic spices. "Despair not," he proclaimed in a letter to his subordinates in 1618. "Spare your enemies not, for God is with us." Sometimes his enemies were his customers. When they did not want to trade with his agents, or preferred the wares of his rivals, the English or the Portuguese, Koon ordered his company's troops to attack. He tolerated neither competitors nor challenges to his authority. The one-legged Peter Stuyvesant was the autocratic governor of the Dutch West India Company's colony at Manhattan. For decades, he resisted all attempts by the increasing numbers of non-employee citizens of the expanding colony to provide responsible government. Stuyvesant ultimately placed his company's interests ahead of those of his country, an approach that resulted in the loss of the entire territory of New Netherland to a foreign power. When, during the Third Anglo-Dutch War, British warships anchored off Manhattan offered the people of New Netherland civil government if they surrendered, the entire militia laid down their arms without firing a shot. The English trader Robert Clive rose from his position as a lowly company clerk to head the military arm of the neophyte English East India Company in the mid-18th century. Despite having no formal training, Clive was a military genius who transformed the company's fortunes with a series of astonishing military victories using company troops over the French East India Company and various local rulers in India during the dying days of the Mughal Empire. He created the foundation for the English East India Company's wealth and political power. After Clive's work, the company was both a monopoly trading enterprise and a civil and taxation authority ruling over 30 million people. Clive later was made a baron and became one of the wealthiest men in Britain. When, in 1772, he was questioned by Parliament about his possible corruption and the sources of his wealth, he indignantly proclaimed, "I stand astonished at my own moderation." Aggressive and efficient, Alexander Andreevich Baranov was an itinerant Russian merchant and trader who first migrated east to Siberia, then to Alaska. In 1799, he assumed command of the Russian-American Company a semi-official monopoly colonial trading company chartered by Tsar Paul I. Baranov pushed Russian enterprise and colonization further south along the Alaskan coast, warring both with First Nations and with competing Russian businesses in the name of his company. In 1804, firing from a Russian warship, he bombarded a Tlingit village for days, forcing the Tlingit to accept the authority of the Russian-American company. He died after 27 years of solidifying his country's territorial claims on the frontier and extracting vast quantities of sea otter furs for the company's shareholders and directors in St. Petersburg.
Russians killing all
George
sea
Simpson,
otters.
haughty and
trade with the
impatient,
Chinese.
was the financial and structural genius who steered the Hudson's Bay Company to its greatest financial success and territorial dominion in the early 19th century. The Little Emperor, as he was known, was the virtual dictator of a good chunk of North America. Responsible for shipping hundreds of thousands of beaver furs to London every year, he was chauffeured about in his vast fur domain, perched in the back of a giant canoe, from where he exhorted his exhausted voyageurs to paddle harder so that he could set speed records and claim all the credit for himself. Soon after he died in 1860, most of Simpson's domain passed from the Hudson's Bay Company's power and became part of the new nation of Canada. Cecil John Rhodes, the British-born South African mining magnate, politician, businessman, and racist promoter of British colonialism, was the founder of the diamond company De Beers. In 1889, he secured British government support for the creation of the British South Africa Company to operate in Rhodesia, a territory he created and allowed to be named after himself. The company was a monopoly trading enterprise that had been granted the right to raise its own private army, regulate banking, and govern while theoretically respecting the rights of native Africans. In reality, it used its power to enrich its shareholders through violent land seizures until 1923, when Britain revoked the company's charter. Rhodes and the British South Africa Company became fabulously rich exploiting Southern Africa's mineral resources under the pretext of governance. Given the opportunity, Rhodes would have gone further. All of these stars, he lamented, these vast worlds that remain out of reach. If I could, I would annex other planets. Whether he wanted to annex them to his country or to his company is not known. From their inconspicuous and unlikely beginnings, these eventual merchant kings faced similar dilemmas after rising to positions of authority in their companies. They were vested with enormous powers by both their companies and their countries, yet there was a clear conflict of interest between advancing the business interests of companies and acting as civil authorities. The merchant kings were monopolists, not capitalists. Their enterprises occupying that gray zone between political and mercantile.
Hey, you know, it's crazy. Like Europeans, when they do the ancestry DNA, they always find they're related to some duke or some great person. And the Africans are like, this is the slave route you went on, and da-da-da-da-da. The ancestors, they don't really know what really happened. They just, like, find little things, and they be like, yeah, I'm going to put you here, I'm going to put you there, like that. They don't really know the whole history, the ancestry and everything. They don't know the journey your ancestors took. They say, yeah, they just came from there and went to North Carolina. That's not true. Like 20 slaves went from North Carolina. That's probably like the Amistad or something. Because, a lot of them are, most of the slaves the Portuguese took. And, they were going to, like, Cuba and Florida. The Spanish got here, they went to Florida. That's why, when other people landed on Florida, there's orange trees there. Because, they had lasted so long from the Spanish people putting them there so long ago. But, so what if a European finds a person who sold their ancestors into slavery? Like, they had this whole series and find out that your relative, your ancestors sold your whole family to get a bag of sugar. Because a lot of Native Americans got sold over bags of sugar and coffee, and Africans too. But, that's why it's like a national security thing. Europeans didn't have a lot of sugar. The Arabians had been enslaving them a long time over sugar. and the Africans too. You know what I'm saying? Like, so European doing ancestry. This is your ancestors who sold your relatives. I'm like, that SOB. Son of a SOB.
Corporation were abhorrent to free market thinkers like Adam Smith. It was a difficult job being both monopoly trader and the civil government, and the temptation to subsume one of these roles under the other is obvious. By making far-reaching decisions according to their conflicted consciences, the merchant kings had a profound influence. Companies are not generally known for having sweeping political control, but in trying to balance the interests of their companies with the interests of their countries, the merchant kings changed history as significantly as the most celebrated military generals, political leaders, and technological innovators did. The 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, sloth, lust, envy, wrath, and gluttony. Each of us is overly familiar with one or more of them at some time in our lives. But for most people, these sins are balanced by the 7 virtues: humility, charity, diligence, chastity, kindness, patience, and temperance. Among the merchant kings in the age of heroic commerce, the 7 deadly sins might seem overrepresented. The absolute, unaccountable power they wielded magnified their more unsavory characteristics. But there was goodness in most of them, too. Complex and intriguing characters, they were neither heroes nor angels. As with military and political leaders, they had their character traits amplified by power and success, making them seem larger than life. Placed in the unique historical setting of societies on the cusp of great upheaval, they seized the opportunities they were given and had an impact on the world as great as that of the most famous monarchs, despots, and generals. By transforming commercial trading entities into political entities, and with their feet firmly anchored in both worlds, these men truly fought for their markets.